seems like we slap this label on it, right? Of like, oh, I'm a progressive, right? And then immediately you get these certain thoughts, you know, in your head, and that's different from anybody across the spectrum of like what they perceive that as. And so they have these, when I tell them that, they initially get those thoughts, but then they circle back and they're like, okay, well, where do you stand on this? And then, you know, like the rural broadband policy and the disability rights that I've proposed and the farming policies that I've proposed, they come back to that and they're like, oh, okay, well, I actually agree with you on those things. Or, you know, well, what are your thoughts on this? And then we can have an actual discussion. So it seems like after the initial, like, I guess shock value is the word I want to say. It's amazing that they actually kind of turn and like actually want to learn more, you know, and then you're able to have those deeper conversations. So.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's something that we as an American society have lost a lot of the ability to have those longer conversations.
Yeah.
I don't know if like, you know, the media messaging, social media or larger media in general. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree completely with you on that. Is like, I remember growing up, you know, in rural Iowa, you know, but we would always have like these discussions. Like I remember sitting around and my grandparents talking with other people about like politics, and like my grandpa was like actually a Democrat, like a old Democrat, loved JFK. That was like his dude, right? And like, but anyway, he would have these discussions, but there wasn't like this anger that people have right now, you know. It was like, oh, you know, they could actually talk about what was going on in politics and nobody would get all mad. And it seems like with all the social media and the way that we have been influenced with like having our own echo chambers that we didn't have before, you know, pre-internet, I think we've been more isolated and not exposed. And so we're just like, oh, well, these are the people that all agree with me and I can just talk with them. And then I don't get any of these outside perspectives, right? And that's on all sides, not one side or another. And I don't have an answer of how we can get away from that and get back to talking with people, but I think that 2016 was the beginning of our fever of that, and I think we're still in the middle of that, and we need to break that fever and start to heal, right? The whole country on that, and it's even global. I mean, look at what's happening across the world with Britain and Brexit, and look at India, what's going on there, and you know, down in the Philippines, you know, it's not just isolated here. Brazil, another country, you know, so there's something that's happening worldwide, and we need to really assess on that.
Definitely. Do you feel like this growing anger and frustration, you know, nationally and internationally? What role, if any, does something like, you know, distribution of wealth and resources and power? I mean, how does that factor into the media messaging that we all now have access to?
Yeah, it's that acclimated wealth is definitely plays into how we hear these messaging, because you know, the corporations and the billionaires and the oligarchs, you know, are able to use like these funds to just like put out a message that they want us to hear, and what they want us to focus on, to keep the infighting versus being angry at their mass accumulation of wealth and the world's resources getting stripped away and all this stuff, you know. Because if we maintain being angry at one another, we're not looking at those guys saying like, wait a minute, you know, like you're destroying the earth, and you are hoarding all of the wealth, and we're having people that are hungry and homeless and unable to provide for themselves unless they have 2 or 3 jobs, when that shouldn't be the case. So that, I think, is the issue, is they're able to influence it with what they want us to see. I mean, I don't know how to fix that idea of getting us to look upward at them. I mean, we've been fighting for that for years and years, but I think that's where we need to stop and look around.
Definitely. And it sounds like that's going to be a struggle that is probably going to be the defining struggle of this generation, is fighting back to control the narrative. Because like you said, and I agree with and acknowledge what you're saying, it's, if we can point fingers at each other and, get mad at one another, then we lose sight of the fact, something like we're subsidizing someone to take the Earth's resources to pollute the Earth, and we're all paying for it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Frustrating. It's frustrating when you unpack things like that, and I just find it interesting that folks across the political spectrum, they just fundamentally want to, do their job, their work, whatever, provide for their family, basic necessities.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, it's frustrating. And what do you say to folks who maybe get frustrated with politics in general, or they say, I just don't want to mess with it, I don't want to hear about politics? What do you say to those folks?
Yeah, and that's it. Like, the first time I went out canvassing actually was on my block, and I knocked on this door, and I talked to this guy, and he's like, yeah, I've never voted because I just don't see the point in it. And I'm like, okay, well, like, I understand you, because he had like all this frustration, he was told me, like, with everybody, that they don't seem to get anything done, and like nothing gets better for him. And I say that that has been the status quo. It's been the status quo for decades, hundreds of years, but we need to organize together, is we need to get involved about what matters to you as a person. What is it that's influencing you not voting because you're frustrated? Is it because you have to work 2 jobs? Well, why do you have to work 2 jobs? Is it because the minimum wage is too low? Is it because you can't get insurance and you've got to work this other job to get your insurance? Like, if you're mad about that, we need to organize and come together and fight for those things. And it's throughout history, like LGBT rights, at civil rights, at the farm workers back in the 60s, all these different movements, they've all taken time, and they've all had to have a mobilization of people. And we have to keep doing that. We have to come together and push and push and push. It's not going to be easy, but we have to keep trying and come together on it. So